pleasure of working with at the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. And Carlin, I'll let you say a few words.
Oh, sure. So I happen to serve on the board for the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance, just in my role as staff person at Consumers Energy. And so I got to work with Andy and then watch the transition from Andy to David. And that transition has been very smooth. And I think the NLEA landed a great new leader. Tough shoes to fill, but certainly a man that's up for the job and brings with him a tremendous amount of economic development experience, both in Northern Michigan, also in the Midland area. So I thought it would be just great to bring him in. I realize the NLEA doesn't technically serve Emmett County right at the moment, but I thought it would be important that everybody got to know this community leader who's playing a big role in our community. So with that, David Emmel.
Hey, thanks, Carlin. Good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can share my screen here. What are you seeing?
Yep, that works.
Got it. So let me talk a little.
Sorry to pause you, Dave. Do you mind if we record this? It is recording. Okay, sorry.
Awesome. January 1st, as I always tell people, the training wheels came off, and and that's great thanks to Andy and the transition that took approximately a 3-month time frame. But we're getting through a number of things, and so it's been I can't say enough positive things about Andy and Andy's openness during the transition, and so thanks to that. And of course the one thing that he gifted me was the 2 Sarahs. That are both members of your morning Rotary. So also very grateful for that, because this would not have happened without their advice and counsel and their support. So thank you. A couple of things that we're focused on right now, intensive kind of areas of focus as we kind of look internally at our organization and how we work. The focus on business development, and that's both on I would say the growth and attraction side is always the case, but there's another nuance to that too, and that's around health and resilience of a lot of our businesses in Northern Michigan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the post-pandemic economy. We're also certainly a lot of continued focus on community development. That's always been kind of one of the mainstays of economic development, and that will always continue to be a paramount focus for us. That is really how we work with communities to advance some of the big challenges that communities have. Issues around housing and childcare and those types of things that help build the base economy for a lot of individuals, with an eye on what I would describe as kind of economic inclusion. How do we create communities and create economies at a local level that allow more people to participate actively in the local economy? The other thing I would tell you is that we're really digging into what I would call industry assessment, and we will be developing, and you'll see some of this happen as well, some industry focus groups. We have some industry sectors in Northern Michigan that are very important to us as kind of an overall community. But to a large extent, and Andy knows this, and many of you probably do too, once you get kind of down to the Lansing area, most people look at Northern Michigan, even the MEDC to some degree looks at Northern Michigan and says, well, it's primarily an ag sector, but it's so much more than that. And so we're gonna start to take more of a deep dive into the analytics on that, really understand what our industries are. We know we have strong ag-related industries and subsectors like craft beverage, which encompasses beer, wine, spirits, seltzers, ciders, and all kinds of things. And we've got another number of different growing industries as well. We have some industries in growth, we have some that are at maturity, and we have some that are probably in decline. And so understanding where those are at in terms of how we craft economic policy locally is going to be very important for us. I would say the other thing we're really focusing on right now, and this is pretty typical, Andy has had some very, very strong and deep relationships in the community over his 15-year tenure, but also being a lifetime member of the community, those relationships are deep. And so one of the change and challenge with that in terms of change of leadership is that those relationships all get recrafted. It's part of how it works. So I cannot wait, like most of you, for us to be past COVID, because it's it's a challenge to not be physically in the presence of one another, as we all know. And so as we kind of look at redefining some of those relationships at our investor level, at our partner level, all those types of things. So it's really recrafting and really getting to know people in their areas of focus in our communities. And then the last thing I would say is, really growing our impact, understanding the value that we provide as an economic development organization. And I would say that one of the areas of keen focus for us is that, and I think we all know this, in economic development, a lot of what we do is really about identifying and removing barriers. Those could be for communities, they could be for businesses, they could be for industries, and in some cases, and in many cases, individuals. And so it's really, working to understand what are the barriers that are out. Every community has different challenges, understanding that there's maybe a modified approach for just about everything. So really trying to grow our impact through understanding the value that we provide and elevating that value is some of our intense focus. Last thing I would say, post-pandemic economy, what's it going to be? I don't think at this point anyone knows. I think our manufacturing sector has been very, very strong in Northern Michigan. And it's possible that some of those manufacturers that pivoted into new product lines, those might continue, but they also might start to dry up after we get through the pandemic. So we might see some compression in some of our manufacturing sector. Our service economy is very strong, as we know. Tourism is a huge part of what we do, and so is recreation. And although there's been some interesting challenges in that, I think we'll come out the other end in good shape. That's kind of my assessment. I think our biggest areas of challenge are going to be our main streets, and so continuing to support small business at a main street level. I think we'll continue to see probably some longer term closures as we get through this next several months. I'd say we're kind of at the peak right now in the pandemic process, if you can describe it as that. So I'm anxious to see where this is going to go, but we're very, very closely watching what's happening in Main Street and what's happening in small business. So with that, I'd open it up for questions. Andy, you get the first and the last question. And you're muted.
Well, one of the things that I remember we were doing before, and then even in your first few months, is every morning the staff had a base touch. Are you guys still doing that? And is that working out pretty well? And talk about that a little bit.
We were doing that. We did shift away from that a little bit. We went to a little bit more intensive staff time during the week. One of the challenges that we have is that we start to develop cadence around those things, and the feedback I got was we want to change it up a little bit. So we've done that, and that's proven to be pretty, I think, well received by the team. So
yeah, super.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the pipes right now? Any big projects that you're working on that are going to excite the community?
Of course, that's always a tough question to answer, because a lot of, as I know Andy has probably said multiple times, a lot of what we do is very early stage. I think there's some interesting things happening in the world of broadband and broadband communications in a lot of our more isolated rural communities. I think you're going to see a lot of that growth happen pretty rapidly. So I think that there's some things happening in that area that I think I don't know if it'll garner a lot of attention. A lot of those infrastructure-based projects tend to not really draw that much. I think one of the areas of focus, of course, I get asked nearly every day, and sometimes multiple times a day, what are we going to do with Emmett County? And that is continues to be at the forefront. We're into relationship development and relationship recrafting and building in Emmett County. And I don't have a clear kind of where this is going to go one way or the other, but we're kind of in that early stages of rebuilding or restructuring, kind of getting to know each other and new players and things like that. So, I think probably the one area, big project that's happening probably, I think for some of you may know, is the consolidation of Jervis Webb down into Boyne City. And it's been interesting as a resident of Emmett County that there hasn't been a lot of kind of, I guess, discussion about that, which is interesting. So, that's a big project. And I think, that's the ripple effect of that in the manufacturing environment, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's going to open up some new space. Whether that space will get
So Dave,
backfilled.
let me interrupt for a second. For many people don't know even know what you're talking about. Talk about what that actually, what in reality.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
back up.
So yeah. All right. Thanks, Andy. So several months ago, the Jervis B. Webb Company, which has locations in Boyne City, Petoskey, Helston at the airport, and Harbor Springs, announced that they were in the process of consolidating all of their manufacturing into one new 210,000 greenfield site in Boyne City.
Right.
And that a lot of the challenge around that is that a large concentration of employees that live in Emmett County, live in Sheboygan County, will now have to transition somehow either through extended travel or relocation closer to this new site in Boyne City. It's roughly 145 jobs concentrated in that area. And while that's a big boom for the industrial, complex industrial area in Boyne City, it's going to create a little vacuum in Emmett County. So yeah, we'll have some properties that will be available. I think that we know that there's some manufacturers in Emmett County and other areas that are looking to grow and expand. And so it's possible that that might open up some opportunities for some other businesses. The time frame on that is they're looking at kind of a spring shovel in the ground of 2021 with a completion fall of 2022. So yeah, big project.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question, Dave. How does the NLEA get involved with housing initiatives?
Yeah, so at least in Charlevoix County, Steve Snell, who many of you know, who's kind of taken on that role, he and I have been meeting and we've been talking a fair amount over the last month or so. There are gaps. I mean, we know if any one of us has done a construction project in our home, we know that the cost of construction is at an all-time high. And so some of the challenges that come with that are, how does that create housing that is more affordable, but is not the traditional affordable housing that we've all become accustomed to. So working with builders and working with the industry and trying to craft developments, there's a number of things happening. There's I would say a kind of a demonstration project down in Newaygo County that recently launched using tax incremental financing to help support that. And what that means is that as the value of the property increases over time, the city then, or the municipality then, is able to recoup that tax. And from an incentive or from an abatement that may be granted to a developer in order to facilitate a housing development project. And so there's some new demonstration projects going on in the state, and it'll be interesting to see how we might adapt a project like that in working with our municipalities to look at either tax credits, tax incentives, or other types of programs that might be available to move a project like that along.
I have a two-part question. I wasn't able to attend the spring event last year. I can't remember. I think you guys still held it, but it might have been outside. But I wondered, and I guess if you didn't hold it, who was picked for the Maniac of the Year? And will there be a spring or fall event like the NLEA has had in the past this year?
So Andy, I'm going to ask you to tell us if there was actually a Maniac award given last year. We did not host our event last year. And it looks less likely that we will do it again this year.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we did not present a Maniac of the Year award. We had one chosen, but we put it on hold thinking that we would slide our event to the fall, like most of the spring events that were canceled. Then that didn't happen. So yeah, so we went.
So you keeping them in the box for later?
Hey, once a Maniac, always a Maniac.
That was always my favorite part of the program.
Yeah, and we're hopeful that by fall we'll be able to. We're making plans right now to move ahead with our fall event, our sporting clays, so that you know more info to come. But a lot of it is dependent upon our ability to gather. So it looks less and less likely at this point that our May kind of annual lunch event will occur.
I have a question about the supply chain. You know, both physical as well as electronic. There are lots of areas of the country that are geographically remote. You know, they're off the beaten path. And with a lot of the big companies going to just-in-time inventory and all that, all the supply chains have been shortened. And there are some areas of the country that have been able to overcome that. For example, Tucson has 20 or 30 call centers because they developed the broadband capability to attract professional employees, the housing and so forth. And there are some manufacturing businesses that are geographically remote from OEMs, and they've been able to overcome those logistics in some way so that they can stay in business. So how does Northern Michigan overcome some of these logistical issues so that they can be competitive players, in the national market for goods and services?
Randy, that's a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up. So this is something I think we all need to really be paying attention to and close attention. So as Industry 4.0, which is becoming the mainstay especially in the automotive supply chains, as Industry 4.0 is starting to grow and develop, the need for Industry 4.0 ready communities, just like we had redevelopment ready communities as kind of part of the mainstay of Michigan Economic Development Corporation's programming. Industry 4.0 readiness is a really big issue for manufacturers. So when you talk about supply chain impacts, what that does, Industry 4.0 is really the connected community in a manufacturing environment. So as you can imagine, every piece of technology on a manufacturing floor can be serviced typically, because so much of that is software based. So a lot of the support can be provided via the World Wide Web and through broadband capabilities. The other part of that is a manufacturer, like a General Motors, being able to monitor their supply chain in real time to know where parts and components are in real time in that process. And Industry 4.0 readiness is something we really need to be paying attention to in Northern Michigan. We have a lot of companies that are tier 1 to tier 4 in the supply chain. The other thing I would tell you, what really kind of works in our favor, if you will, the biggest buyer that likes really rural and remote areas is the Department of Defense. They really tend to look for, especially for things like prototyping and early stage technology that, where they can work with a smaller supplier in a way that they, sometimes flies under the radar of the federal budget process. And that tends to be very attractive, where off the beaten path works for them. Mm-hmm. So, but in the same token, it requires connectivity in order to do that. So just like the automotive manufacturing environment or the automotive supply chain, the federal government supply chain works the same way. So the ability for connectedness, and it's going to push in some cases a lot of those, what I call, early stage pole barn manufacturing companies to really get connected and get on the grid. And it's going to create some interesting challenges for us. But 4.0 is coming, and it's coming fast.
Great,
So-
thanks.
One thing that your statements like that make to me make aware, again, I'm a small player in a big world, the pit that we have that is not filled with anything. We've been looking forever to try to get some facility to be like a 300-person convention center, nothing massive, but something that you could bring a lot of people in, that would include trucking agencies and stuff, that would be able to look at how you could service what we have up here for opportunity for business, with the fact that you got to have these trucks. When, I used to travel a lot, hitchhike especially, you'd get a ride with somebody that had to go to one place to drop something off, but would be coordinated by a dispatcher to pick up something else to take it to another location. So they're never taking an empty vehicle anywhere. And I think that in that model of all the, like you say, there's so much that's made here, built here, whatever, we need to be attractive to people to realize how close we are off of like I-75 and some of the stuff, so that if somebody's planning things, but if we had these convention centers that could bring people together and see what this area is, it might make us more attractive to them by the knowledge of the resources available, both in transportation and in personnel and in quality of product.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, supply chains are critical. I mean, it is where a lot of our wealth creation industry, whether it's, and again, it's manufacturing, but it's also agriculture. And kind of, I would say everything in between. So the movement of goods and materials, the physical movement of goods and materials, we actually have a premier provider of logistics services in Northern Michigan. And a lot of companies are very dependent on one company for that service, and they do a great job. And so when you look at the concentration of manufacturing, specifically kind of in the Boyne City area, yeah, there's a player in the supply chain down there that, as we ask companies kind of through that retention visit process, questions like, well, if you think about your 5 biggest suppliers in your supply chain, is there one that you would like to have, you'd find a lot of value in having co-located somewhere, by your manufacturing facility? We're asking those questions because we're looking for the hits, right? If we get 2 or 3 manufacturers that, say the same thing, and it's a company that's not currently here, it's a company we're going to go after. In terms of co-location. But I will tell you that the one thing in common that every company in the manufacturing sector says is it's our logistics supplier. No question about it. And it's intermodal logistics, and it's intra and inter company logistics. It's moving products from work in process between could be powder coating, could be any types of value add that has to happen within the company, to finished goods distribution to its final destination.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. And thanks for all the great questions.
Hey, I got one more.
All right, we'll squeeze in.
Can I make one statement?
Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. Hey, David, I just wanted to tell you that I rate a speaker by whether they answer my questions before I got to ask them, and you did that this morning. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, though, was Northern Logistics. We're remodeling our North Star, and we needed something right away. And Northern Logistics picked it up and delivered that day out of Grand Rapids. We thought that was pretty good movement there.
No time done. Thanks, Dave Meyer.
Yeah.
And Dave Emmel, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Great to see everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, David.